Can I tell you about a conversation that genuinely stopped me in my tracks? Not because it was dramatic, but because of what it quietly revealed. You see, years ago, a friend of mine, an HR leader, invited me to co facilitate the strategy session for a large manufacturing company in Lagos. Naturally, I said yes. Helping organizations think better is one of my favorite things to do. So we began putting the agenda together. As I reviewed the draft, I suggested adding one session that I was particularly excited about. I called it Voice of the Customer. The idea was simple. Let's invite a few business leaders into the HR retreat. Let them tell HR without filters how they experienced the function over the past year, what worked, what frustrated them, what they wished HR would stop doing, and what they desperately needed HR to start doing before the next financial year. I thought it would become the most valuable conversation of the entire retreat. I sent the revised agenda to my friend, really feeling pleased with myself. A few hours later, my phone rang. Caller, I've seen your agenda. Oh, great. I think we have to remove the voice of the customer session. I assumed it was a logistic problem. So my response was, oh, no worries. We don't need to have many people anyway. Let's just invite three or four of the leaders. Then came his reply. It's not that. The business leaders won't be available. All of them? Yes, every single one. Now, my curiosity was fully awake. What could possibly make every senior business leader unavailable on the same day? Then he said something I'll never forget. They will all be attending their own strategy retreats. I paused. Sorry? Oh, the executive team is having its own annual strategy retreat. At the same time? I asked. Oh, yes. So HR isn't a part of that? A small laugh. Then came the sentence that completely changed the conversation. My friend said, no, we deliberately scheduled the HR retreat for the same period so that the business wouldn't miss HR in the office. I don't know what expression caused my face, but inside my head, everything went quiet. The business was deciding its future. HR was making sure someone stayed in the office to answer the phone. One group was deciding where the organization would compete, the other group was making sure the lights stayed on. In that moment, I realized this wasn't really about scheduling, it was about identity. Because whether we admit it or not, every organization quietly answers one question about every function. Can we make our biggest decisions without them? If the answer is yes, then that function has unintentionally become operational, not strategic. Now, think about it. When the CEO gathers the leadership team to answer questions like, where are we going? What market should we enter? What capabilities must we build? What kind of organization must we become? Shouldn't the people responsible for attracting, developing, and retaining those capabilities already be in the room? After all, strategy is executed by people, culture is built by people, innovation comes from people, transformation happens through people. So, how can the conversation about business strategy happen without the people strategy already sitting at the table? And before anyone says, oh, well, that's just HR, it isn't. That same question applies to every support function: finance, technology, legal, risk, communications, learning. Every function eventually teaches the business how to think about it. Some become strategic partners, others become excellent service providers. Both are valuable, but they're not the same thing. Now, here's what struck me most. Nobody woke up one morning and decided, let's exclude HR. Organizations rarely make decisions that deliberately. They simply invite the functions they consistently think shapes the conversation. Over time, the invitation list becomes the perception list, and perception eventually becomes reality, which raises an uncomfortable question. If your department disappeared for 2 weeks, what decisions will stop? Not the emails, not the approvals, not the paperwork, the decisions. Because that's where strategic influence lives. Strategic influence doesn't live in activities, it lives in indispensability. Perhaps the most dangerous place for any professional isn't being overworked. It is in becoming so operationally efficient that people forget you're capable of strategic thinking. Because once the business sees you as the people who organize the retreats, instead of helping shape the future discourse at the retreats, you have quietly trained the organization how to value you. So, let me leave you with one question. When your organization is deciding its future, are you in the room because you're needed or absent because you've unknowingly taught people that your contribution begins after the decisions have already been made? Organizations don't usually exclude strategic partners. They exclude functions that have quietly accepted being support. And perhaps the biggest career risk isn't being left out of the meeting. It is becoming so useful operationally that nobody thinks to invite you strategically. Make the connection? Call out here. Just trying to clarify.